Today, we're taking a look at the stories of David, Quentin, Kate, Adam, and Jeff in Dead by Daylight. Starting off with good old David King, who was set for life, but decided to throw it all away for some very questionable hobbies. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This is the story of the survivors of Dead by Daylight, chapters 5 through 10. David Tiger King.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
Oh, hello. Sorry. Our first survivor from across the pond. Englishman David King was born in Manchester, UK, and was the single child of a super wealthy family. His father was unfortunately very abusive, mainly towards his mother. Being exposed to his father's anger issues is probably why David developed his own anger issues down the line. But let's not jump the gun. David was highly gifted in sports and academics, and thanks to his family's massive network of connections, he knew he could basically succeed at anything he wanted to. The world was his oyster. But the one thing David enjoyed most in life was beating the shit out of someone. I guess like father, like son. Since he knew he needed an outlet and he was good at sports, David decided to join the rugby team at his university. Thanks to his athletic prowess and desire to inflict pain, David was exceptional at rugby. He was great. But none of that would matter after he lost his temper during a game and assaulted a referee, earning him a lifetime ban from the sport. But David didn't care at all. Since he was rich as hell, he just saw the rugby ban as an early retirement. So to add fuel to the growing dumpster fire that is his life, David spent the majority of his days at the pub, drinking brewskis, watching sports, and you guessed it, getting into fights. As a side hustle, he also became a debt collector. Not sure why he needed a side hustle if he was already set for life, but I digress. David also started partaking in bare-knuckle fight clubs, but as is protocol, we don't talk about that. But all of the chaos that is the life of David would come to head when David stopped showing up to the pub. His friends figured he finally picked the wrong fight with the wrong person. And, in a way, they were right. Man, what a story that was, huh? How you guys feeling tonight? Okay, anyways, boy do I have a joke for you guys. Listen to this. Why was Freddy Krueger late for work? Huh? 'Cause traffic is a nightmare on Elm Street. Whatever. Curtains! Quentin Will Smith. In case you were unaware, Quentin Smith is a licensed survivor transplant from the Nightmare on Elm Street horror series, specifically the 2010 remake. I know the movie's like 15 years old at this point, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will definitely be some spoilers heading your way. Anyways, in the remake, Quentin's friend and longtime crush, Nancy Holbrook, no, not that Nancy, and him put two and two together and realize Freddy is coming after them specifically because they're the last remaining descendants of the people who burned the old preschool janitor Freddy Krueger alive after he did unspeakable actions to the kids. Nancy and Quentin managed to finesse Freddy Krueger and pull him into the real world where Nancy slices Freddy's upper neck area. Please don't demonetize me, YouTube. The two are relieved that they managed to kill the demon. That was, of course, until Nancy and her mother were finally back home when suddenly Freddy shows up in the reflection of a mirror and whacks Nancy's mom. And that's where Quentin's story picks up in DVD. Once he hears the news about Nancy's mom, he jumps right into action. He knows it's just a matter of time before Freddy comes for both him and Nancy. He decides his best course of action is to go to the local library and find out everything he can about these sleep demons who kill people when they dream. Mind you, Quentin hasn't slept in days, and it's catching up to him. He knows if he falls asleep, it's GG's, go next. In order to combat this, he pops some undisclosed pills and Celsius energy drinks. Sparkling strawberry guava is his favorite, but a crutch can only last so long. He starts nodding off. At first, Freddy only taunts him, staying at a distance, but it's enough to let Quentin know, your ass is grass, bucko. Quentin wakes up, or so he thinks, at the local preschool. Badham Preschool, the sign out front says. Sounds familiar. Quentin bolts to the school. He can sense Freddy is nearby. He's running up and down the hallways, trying to find anything to give him an edge against the demon. Something catches his eye. A can of paint thinner. Nice. That's highly flammable in case you didn't know. Back on track. The plan is set. Quentin sets up shop in a classroom, using himself as bait to lure Freddy into his trap. Freddy falls for it. The ear-piercing sound of metal scraping can be heard just off in the distance as Freddy runs his claws along the wall, inching closer and closer. At just the perfect moment, Quentin tosses the can into the hallway like Shaq at the free throw line and sets it on fire. With no time to lose, Quentin bolts out of the classroom and heads straight for an escape he can see just off in the distance. A crack in the matrix, which is his way out. But of course that would be too easy. Right before his eyes, the crack in the dream closes up. Quentin turns around and now he's in Freddy's secret room, the room where he took the kids. Freddy's in there with him, smiling as he moves in. At that moment, Quentin feels nothing but pure rage, wanting nothing more than to be rid of this horrid creature. As the rage consumes him, a peculiar black fog starts creeping into the room. It completely engulfs Quentin's vision. When it finally clears, he's in yet another place. This time, however, he's next to a campfire. And he is not the only survivor. Detective David Tapp. Back in January of 2018, Chapter 7 in Dead by Daylight brought us the Saw chapter, which came with a new killer named The Pig, a new map with a concerning amount of pallets named Gideon Meatplant, and of course, a new survivor, Detective David Tapp. If for some reason you've never heard of the Saw movie series, it's a horror franchise with about 6,000 films, with the first one releasing in 2004 and shortly after becoming a pop culture phenomenon. The franchise rose to this status due to a few factors. Combining the elements of a police procedural drama with the addition of bloody dismemberment that came to be known as torture porn, Saw added unique aspects to the genre that weren't overdone, which is important in a genre that is typically laden with remakes and long-running franchises. I can practically taste the irony of that last sentence. The whole plot of the films revolve around a serial killer named Jigsaw, who kidnaps people he claims do not have enough appreciation for life, and subjects them to a series of tests, which in reality is just a bunch of homemade torture devices designed to kill a human in the worst ways imaginable. The ones who don't survive Jigsaw's games were found by authorities with the shape of a puzzle piece cut out of their bodies. They would come to learn Jigsaw did this for a particular reason. The jigsaw piece that I cut from my subjects was only ever meant to be a symbol that that subject was missing something. A vital piece of the human puzzle, the survival instinct. The ones who did survive Jigsaw's games were deemed by him as rehabilitated, or people who have truly learned the value of life. One of the few successful contestants was a former drug addict named Amanda Young, whose test was to remove a reverse bear trap from her head, which is, well, a bear trap that's fixed on her head and is set to rip her jaws apart. She successfully removed the trap by cutting the key to the trap out of the stomach of her still living cellmate, who also just happened to be someone she recognized from the clinic that she was previously recovering at. After passing the test, Amanda then became the Pig, a disciple of Jigsaw's, who helped rehabilitate his victims. A classic case of Stockholm Syndrome. You hate to see it. In the first film of the series, Saw 2004, a seasoned detective is determined to bring Jigsaw, the Pig, and the whole operation down. His name? Detective David Tapp. Tapp had a very long and respected career in the police force. When he first caught wind of Jigsaw and his crimes, he wasn't too impressed. He just chalked it up to another lunatic serial killer. Unbeknownst to him, Jigsaw would be the biggest challenge Tapp would face in his entire career, and the last one he would ever face. In this world anyways. After interrogating Amanda Young, Detective Tapp deciphers the location of Jigsaw's lair thanks to a tape found at Amanda's trap location. Tapp and his partner, Detective Steven Singh, make their way to an abandoned mannequin factory. There, they eventually find exactly what they're looking for. Jigsaw himself. A chase ensues. The survivors are actually chasing the killer. Oh, how the tables have turned. But like they say, you should never bring a gun to a knife fight, because while the two detectives are just trying to bring Jigsaw in for questioning, he manages to get in close and slash Tapp's neck. By some miracle, it's not fatal. His partner Singh, however, would eventually get bested by one of Jigsaw's traps. Now with the guilt of his partner's death on his hands, and now realizing Jigsaw is built different, Tapp wants nothing but revenge, and starts obsessing over how he's going to catch the SOB once and for all. As his obsession grows, Tapp becomes more and more unstable. This instability eventually leads to him being kicked off the force and his wife leaving him just to boot. But with nothing left to lose, Tapp doesn't care. he's locked in. A series of clues leads Tapp to an apartment owned by a man named Dr. Lawrence Gordon, who Tapp believes just might be Jigsaw. Tapp stakes out the place from the comfort of his Tesla Model Y, but suddenly, someone else appears inside the doctor's apartment when gunshots ring out from the inside. Tapp hops into pursuit and chases the hooded gunman down. The chase leads to an industrial building, but Tapp's hatred for cardio, which I can relate to, gets the better of him. He starts getting gassed. A brief scuffle ensues and the killer manages to get a hold of Tapp's gun and pulls the trigger. Tapp is laying on his back, staring up at the ceiling of this dark, rundown building. He had been shot directly in the chest at point blank. But instead of focusing on that pain, Tapp is focused on the anger he feels. Anger that he has failed yet again, and how an unknown amount of lives will be lost as a direct result of his failure. Jigsaw will live on, and he will not. Tapp let the anger completely consume him, and he laid his head back and accepted his fate. But underneath him, he could feel the concrete floor begin to soften. He feels dirt and leaves under his hands. He reaches his hand up to his chest. His shirt is dry. His eyes open to a dark sky and trees surrounding him. He slowly but surely picks himself up. He didn't know what this place was, but he was still a cop, and he always would be. He had a job to do. Kate the Great Denson. Kate is lucky number 13 on the list of DBD survivors. She came to the game alongside Jeffrey Hawk, aka The Clown, and a new map, Father Campbell's Chapel. Kate is probably the most wholesome survivor I've covered to date. She is the classic American girl next door, and her entire purpose in life was to spread good vibes through her love for music. But that's just the TLDR. Of course, she wouldn't be on the list if her story didn't end in tragedy. Because, of course, there are no happy endings in Dead by Daylight. Kate's story begins back when she was just a young child. Technically, it begins when she was born, but I'm paraphrasing. After learning a song at school, she sang it back to her family, who loved it. Even at such a young age, she knew right then and there what her only goal in life was: to make people happy through her music. So, Kate picked up the guitar and played it till her fingers bled. At the ripe old age of 8 years old, she began playing shows in front of crowds. Her biggest supporter and biggest fan, her mother, did everything to support Kate in her dream, even bringing Kate all the way to the home of country music, hot chicken, and horrible transportation infrastructure, Nashville, Tennessee. Once Kate was old enough to drive, she bought herself a shitty old Chevy pickup truck and started driving herself around to shows. She played festivals, dive bars, you name it, and people loved her. People flocked to her voice and self-penned songs of friendship, family, love, and home. Home was very important to Kate. She took great joy in traveling the country and bringing her wisdom back to her hometown to entertain all the local children. See what I mean? Just super wholesome. But as I previously warned, this is Dead by Daylight we're talking about. On one of Kate's hometown visits, she was out for a nice long stroll in the woods around town. She loved exploring the forests surrounding her town. She even had a favorite spot she would return to time and time again. A clearing in the forest that was lined by trees with an opening in the center full of rocks. It was here she was the most inspired to create her signature music. Kate had her guitar with her, and just like every other time, she sat down to jam out some tunes. But as she started strumming the guitar, the music that was coming out had a much darker undertone than usual. Her songs are normally uplifting and upbeat, but not this time. Nonetheless, she kept jamming. As Kate continued playing this dark song, the forest around her started coming to life. The leaves around her started moving along in unison with the song. The trees started growing rapidly. Out of the tree line, spider-like legs descended from the canopy above and started grasping at Kate. She finally snapped out of whatever trance she was in and came to her senses. She picked up a big rock she found nearby and chucked it at the spider legs coming at her, but they just bounced off them like a pebble on a brick wall. The legs wrapped around Kate and scooped her up into the now stormy dark sky that had formed above. There was nothing she could do. Black fog had crept all over the forest. Once it finally cleared, there was nothing left behind besides Kate Denson's guitar. Adam Francis, everybody, woo! Adam Francis, the man with two first names. Fictionally born in Rollington Town in Kingston, Jamaica, Adam Francis is the 14th survivor in Dead by Daylight. He was released on September 18th, 2018 as 1/3 of the Shattered Bloodline chapter. With him came along Rin Yamaoka, or better known as The Spirit, which is probably the saddest killer backstory in DBD, and a new map, the Yamaoka estate realm. When Adam was only 2 years old, his father passed away in a car accident. Adam's uncle, a strict but fair man, took him in. He raised Adam to be a solid dude and really hammered into him the importance of a good education. This guidance from his uncle would eventually lead Adam to enroll at Kingston College. Here, Adam discovered his father's published works, who was an established writer. And it was his father's work that would ignite Adam's passion for literature. But the college Adam was going to was majorly athletes, so Adam, that nerd, stood out like a sore thumb. He got bullied for his nerdy endeavors, but he wasn't a little wimp. He was 260.
I'm 260, bro.
So he could defend himself if it came to it. But as Adam progressed through college, he realized he wanted to explore the world beyond his hometown, and luckily his grades and a demand for teachers abroad would give him such an opportunity. Adam graduated college and grinded through his teaching career for a year, where he was finally able to land a position abroad. He finally found himself on a plane headed to southern Japan for a fresh start in life. Adam touched down in Kagoshima, Japan. As you can imagine, moving to a completely new country comes with a plethora of new challenges you wouldn't expect. Since Adam's Japanese was mild at best, everyday tasks that would take minutes would take hours, if not longer. Figuring out groceries, planning commutes, and creating lessons plan in a Japanese context. It all took a hot minute. But over time, Adam adapted and he started to hit his stride in Kagoshima. His Japanese had vastly improved, and this trickled down into every aspect of his life. He could go out and actually do things now, even going so far as to take his students on a class trip to South Korea to see the band No Spin that was taking over the world with their music. Little did Adam know at the concert that night that the lead singer of No Spin, Ji Woon-hak, would go on to develop a penchant for serial killing, but that's a story for a different day. Adam was riding on a train to work one day, just kind of basking in how well his life has become in Japan and how far he's progressed. This peacefulness would not last very long. In an instant, Adam heard the loud scraping of the train tracks and a sudden momentum shift as the train started to derail. Adam went flying as the train flipped upside down. He found himself laying on a window pane. He looked up and saw an unhinged door flying through the air, heading straight for a young girl. In a moment of unthinkable courage, Adam rolled over so he was in between the path of the door and the girl. He closed his eyes as he braced for impact. Nothing happened. Adam slowly opened his eyes, but he saw nothing. A black fog had completely engulfed the train. Suddenly, he felt extremely cold. Ice seemed to course through his veins and spread throughout his body. The cold seemed to hypnotize him though, and he slowly closed his eyes again as the darkness took over. Teachers at the school Adam worked at saw the news of the train wreck on TV. They immediately assumed the worst as it came to light that Adam was missing. His bag was recovered from the wreckage. His body, however, was not. To this day, his uncle believes that Adam took off after the train crash, alive still, somewhere out there. Jeff Johansen. The Norwegian metalhead Jeff Johansen came to the Fog on December 11th, 2018. With him came The Legion and the scientifically proven best map in DBD, Mount Ormond Resort. Jeff Johansen was of Norwegian descent and was born and raised in Ormond, Alberta, Canada. He was the only child of two parents who loved him, but unfortunately they didn't exactly see eye to eye on everything. As a result, his parents being in some sort of an argument was not uncommon. While his parents constantly went at it, little Jeff was tucked away in his room, often listening to music. He became quite introverted from this isolation, and it carried over to his time in school. In school, Jeff kinda kept to himself and didn't say much. His stoic behavior intimidated his peers, which kept would-be bullies at bay. It helped that he was also 260.
I'm 260.
But Jeff was more than content with keeping himself company. He fell in love with heavy metal music and developed a strong passion for collecting vinyls from his favorite bands. The art on the cover of these vinyls was exceptionally profound to Jeff. Through them, he was inspired to start creating his own art. And very quickly, this became his escape from his parents' fighting and lack of any real friendships. To get out of the house and make a little cash money on the side, Jeff picked up a job at a video store. Business wasn't exactly booming here, so to pass the time on the clock, Jeff drew little sketches on any piece of paper he could find laying around. While seemingly insignificant to him, little did Jeff know that one of these sketches would seal his tragic fate. One day, one of the regulars walked into the store. A young dude wearing jeans and a black leather jacket. He peeked down at the counter Jeff was sitting behind. He noticed Jeff's little sketch and thought it was awesome. The guy asked Jeff if he would be willing to paint a mural for his gang up at an abandoned lodge on Mount Ormond. As this would technically be Jeff's first commissioned gig, He was more than obliged to take the job. The guy introduced himself, Frank, and then said he'd catch up with Jeff later. A few days later, Jeff met up with Frank and his gang at the abandoned lodge and got to work on the mural. As requested, he painted the words "The Legion" in running, bloody letters. Frank and co. were very pleased with the piece and paid Jeff $50 and a 12-pack of brewskis. Nice. Just before Jeff graduated high school, his parents would finally divorce, forcing Jeff to move with his mother to Winkler, Manitoba. With even less familiarity here, Jeff was more isolated than ever. But he eventually made it through high school and did some job hopping. For a few years, he was a roadie, which was a positive because it got him out of Winkler. But unfortunately, he would suffer a pretty brutal eye injury after a fight at a concert one night. While in recovery from the eye injury, Jeff reassessed where he was at in life. He decided to go back to art school, which in turn would land him a job designing labels for microbreweries. And this would be his life, brewing beer, designing tattoos and album covers, and taking in a rescue dog. A nice, quiet life. But the peaceful life would be shaken up once again when Jeff received the call that his father passed away back in Ormond. Jeff made the painful drive all the way back to Ormond. He hadn't been here in years, so he was hit with all sorts of nostalgia as he made his way to his father's house. Here, Jeff would stumble upon a guitar his dad left for him. A sticky note was placed on the case that said, "For my boy." Jeff wasn't in a rush to leave Ormond. He wanted to soak in the memories of his childhood and his father. He remembered that old mural he painted up Mount Ormond and decided to go check it out. He bought himself a 12er of Blue Moon Belgian white ales and made his way up to that old abandoned lodge. Weeks had passed and Jeff's co-workers at the microbrewery came to grips with the belief that the grief of his father's passing had gotten the better of Jeff. His neighbor, who had kindly taken care of his dog while he was gone, finally had enough as the dog grew more and more agitated each day Jeff was gone. The dog became a stray who would never stop following the scent of his best friend, Jeff Johansen. All right, that's going to do it for tonight's show. How about a round of applause for today's survivors? What a lively bunch. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I've been your host, Krezel, and I'll see you next week for Happy Hour, where it's half off PBRs at the bar. Lord knows you guys could use a drink or two. Okay, great. See you next time. What is with these people?